Welcome to the AI+HI Project. I'm Nichol Bradford, SHRM's Executive in Residence for AI+HI. Thanks for joining us. Each week, we sit down with visionaries from the worlds of business, tech, and HR to provide you with deep insights, actionable strategies, and practical advice for harnessing the transformative potential of artificial intelligence combined with human ingenuity. This week, we're diving into the intersection of neuroscience, leadership, and AI, and exploring how our understanding of the human brain can help shape better AI systems and improve human decision-making in the office. Our guest is Dr. Michael Platt, the James S. Repe University Professor and Director of Wharton Neuroscience. Dr. Platt, welcome to the AI+HI Project.
Thank you, Nicole. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So at the Wharton Neuroscience Lab, you combine neuroscience, psychology, marketing. You just talked about neuroeconomics. How would you define the role that neuroscience plays in helping organizations navigate AI adoption? It's kind of like modern anthropology. Like, how does it work?
Well, that's a great question. We are ambitious and comprehensive in our application of neuroscience to business. So basically, the idea is to take the insights, the technology, the analytics of neuroscience and apply those to every domain of business. Because frankly, there's a human brain behind every business decision that's made, whether it's the CEO or the manager or the creative or the customer, right? And what neuroscience gives us is the capability to go deeper, to look under the hood, so to speak, to understand the motivations that drive people to make the decisions that they do, to understand their own internal motivations, talents, traits, and drivers that suit them really well towards some jobs, and perhaps it's a little more difficult to pursue others. And in that way, by looking under the hood, it gives us access to a different kind of data that is in fact unbiased, right? The typical way of understanding human nature is to ask people questions. Not to say that that's useless; it's very useful. But we can complement that in a really, really important and robust way by accessing how our brains actually work quite directly.
So let's talk about decision-making specifically. How can AI be designed to better align with how the human brain processes information and makes choices, especially in high-stakes environment like leadership, or especially right now as organizations are implementing AI? It's a very high-stakes environment to have employees buy in. So how can AI help with our decision making while we're in this high stakes transition?
I think it can help a lot. And this is where neuroscience, I think, is very instructive, because it's important to understand that our brains are actually not computers. Our brains are much more like Swiss Army knives that evolved a long time ago to solve some very specific problems. And so that Swiss Army knife that we have in our heads, you've got a knife in there and a nail file and a corkscrew, my favorite. And those haven't changed very much over the millennia. And so once you recognize that, I think then we can understand where some of our difficulties that we have in making decisions. So I think we all know that, or can appreciate that, when we have to make decisions really fast, we make a lot more mistakes. It's just kind of like a law of the way our brains work, the way our brains are designed for efficiency and for an environment that's not like the one we live in today. So an environment in which people lived in small groups. They had face-to-face contact all day long. Nothing moved faster than an antelope, and nothing changed more quickly than the seasons. And so when you take that kind of brain and put it in a modern environment, it's no wonder people are scared. They make mistakes, right? And we do kind of silly things that we often that are often called irrational aspects of our decisions, or biases in our decision making. And those just result from these constraints, these limitations, and design principles that our brains, on which they're built. So by understanding those rules by which our brains live by, we can navigate around them much better. So what can AI do? For example, AI can sift through millions and millions and millions of data points and decisions that others have made and return to us a more limited and perhaps optimal set of options amongst which we might choose. One of the foibles of human decision making is the so-called choice fatigue, or the tyranny of choice, which is the observation that the more options we have in front of us, the harder time we have actually making a decision, and often we regret that decision. So, economists have been telling us forever that the more options you give somebody, the more likely they are to find what they want, the happier they're going to be. It turns out to be almost completely the opposite. So here's a place where AI can fill in the blanks in a sense, right, and help us to reduce the options so that we can make a much more reasonable decision that we're probably going to be much happier with.
That's so interesting. There's so many directions I could go with that. But one of the questions that I have is, do we do ourselves a disservice by having this metaphor that our brains are computers?
That's an interesting question. I would say so. I mean, I think that if we view our brains as computers, then we make the assumption that it's just a matter of effort. We can learn everything. We can become completely rational. And I think that that's really going to be very, very difficult. Sure, we can, through training and through, slowing down and taking deep breaths and things like that, we can begin to mitigate some of the challenges that we face as decision makers. But ultimately, you can't overcome that completely. It's just the way our brains are built. So I think that recognizing that and kind of giving ourselves permission to be biological organisms and not computers is really helpful. You can say, hey, I absolve myself of feeling guilty for, having difficulty choosing when there are too many options, or for making mistakes when I go really fast. And here's how I can use AI as a tool that can help me with some of the challenges that I face when I'm making decisions.
Yeah, I think that the man as machine or human as machine that sort of migrated to human as computer is the thing that makes us feel like we're competing, or makes many feel like we're competing with AI, as opposed to actually we're this biological system. We have different strengths and weaknesses, and this is a tool for us. Um, so looking ahead, how do you see the field of neuroeconomics transforming as AI gets more integrated into how we understand decision making? Because we're going to have, over the next couple of years, we're going to have more and more examples of what you described of AI complementing human decision making. And so, how will neuroeconomics change?
It's an interesting question. I don't know how much neuroeconomics will change, because in many ways it's a fairly academic discipline. But let's broaden that lens to, how will people change? How will each and every one of us who has access to the technology, and that's a really big deal, which is access, which we can talk about. But what we're going to see is a merger between human, biological human beings, and technological machines. So we're beginning to see that already as devices become smaller. And by devices, I mean ways of getting access to what's going on in our heads, right, in our brains. As they become smaller, less intrusive, more accurate, that can provide a sort of secondary data stream to the AI that can complement what you're doing, what you're saying, and the vast, the history of everything that you've done in the past, to hopefully begin to kind of create something like a superhuman capability that will allow us to be, more creative and more innovative than we were in the past, to make better, faster decisions, to capitalize on our strengths, and hopefully, and I think this is the one that's really perhaps one of the biggest challenges, work together as hybrid teams. And when I say hybrid teams, I mean teams of people with AI and other kinds of technologies that can operate seamlessly together, that can have good chemistry and have good communication. That will be accelerated by some of the things I've already discussed in terms of the technology itself, but also making it much more human-like. The more human-like it is, the easier it will be for us to, to work with AI and other automated technologies that become more and more human.
One of the ways that you came onto my radar is that I found your research into biosynchrony and chemistry and the amount of team success that comes from people really being able to collaborate. And so I'm curious, what excites you the most about the potential for AI to enhance team collaboration, organizational culture, engagement, in the way that you have described just a moment ago, plus your research?
All right, so let's talk about synchrony. And when we say, when you have this feeling that you're really in sync with someone, you really are. And it happens at a really deep biological level. So if we're having a conversation, let's say you and I, and we woke up, in different time zones perhaps, and we might have had a different experience over the night. I had a stressful experience on the way into the office this morning. You might not have. And so our brains are in very different states. And as we begin to have this conversation, our brains come into alignment so that the pattern of activity in my brain becomes much more similar to the pattern of activity in your brain. The closer those are in alignment, the what the closer we are psychologically. That increases the likelihood that we'll collaborate well, improves communication, it builds trust. It's really a marker of our relationships. And we've shown that that extends beyond kind of individual pairwise interactions to entire teams. And when teams are in sync, they make better decisions. So I think understanding that again is really important, because as we want to build AI tools that can turn that synchrony up, right? By, for example, measuring it and then say selectively activating people with particular kinds of information or prompts so that that team comes into better alignment, then that team will make better decisions. It turns out that team will be more innovative. It's not that they'll be more prone to groupthink, but they'll be better at using all the information that's available and then executing the task at hand. So again, this is all super new, right? Even our knowledge of biological synchrony is only in the last decade. And now we have it here as a really powerful way of getting people to collaborate with a high degree of efficiency and trust and innovation. And AI can potentially be the sort of master, switch operator, if you will, to move us into alignment very, very quickly, even potentially when we're not in the same place, which I think is, one of the key challenges, because of course, biological synchrony is one of these things that evolved and develops when we're in the real world with people, and how we might actually turn that up when we're in different places, when we're working with each other, using virtual tools. I think that's the next step in this challenge.
Yeah, I am obsessed with biosynchrony, and when I talk about it, people say, "Oh, do you mean synchronicity?" I'm like, "No, it is the opposite of that. It is, observable, repeatable, validated. There's a tremendous amount of bio data, from microfacial expressions to respiration to heart rate variability, that shows up reliably when humans are in sync." And so, one of the things that you said earlier, what's happening right now is we are going to be learning over the next couple of years, what does it really look like when we have a tremendous amount of AI in our companies, and not in the old fashioned, you use Google way, but the way that we're doing it now, and how that affects us, how that affects our team. And what is the allocation of essentially labor that we do, that AI does, and how can I think one of the key things is, like, how can our understanding of the brain and neuroscience allow us to, really lay out the best way for that combination of humans and AI to be, so that organizations can accomplish their goals, so that employees can be engaged. So it's tremendously exciting, but it's also all very new, as you mentioned.
Well, it's new and it's uncertain. Things are changing so rapidly and unexpectedly as well. And, to be honest, human brains don't deal with uncertainty and volatility very well. That's something, that's a trigger that kind of sets off a number of different processes in the brain that kind of widens our scope for learning. But it also triggers emotional responses. And I think that that's, in a lot of the work that I've been doing with leaders, business leaders in the last 2 years since AI really burst onto the scene, is trying to help them position their companies better to take advantage of that. And I think that's like one of the really most important things is for these leaders to tap into their EQ, to their social and emotional intelligence, so that they can be better readers of the people that they lead, so they can be better models for how to maintain their equilibrium in the face of all of this, volatility and uncertainty, and so that they can potentially use the time and space efficiencies that AI provides to intentionally create time and space for employees to work on the things that help them to be their best selves, to build strong relationships with each other, because that's the primary source of resilience that we have, and that's deeply baked into our brains. And also to give them the space to be much more creative and innovative. So that's, again, another thing that we understand from neuroscience, something that our lab is working on for quite some time, is that we're not at our creative best when we are plugged into our computer and toiling away at routine tasks. And in fact, we need to step away from that laser focus on the challenge in front of us and allow our minds to open and wander. And that's when kind of, this sort of unpredictable journeys happen in our minds, and we come up with crazy new ideas that just might be the next big solution. So the efficiencies that AI brings, potentially, if we harness that in the right way, can help leaders to provide the the best kind of culture and setting for human beings, but also human ingenuity to flourish.
As I've been thinking about it, I just want to bounce something that I've been thinking about off of you. I am, with all of the disruption, I think we haven't even really begun to see just how disruptive this generation of AI will be into everything. It's going to change everything. And so I actually think now the number one survival skill is adaptability, and not just for resilience, but also for cognitive flexibility. And then I think the number one thriving skill is ideation, because in previous models of how we created value, 20% was the idea and 80% was the building and operating. And now that's going to flip, where much of AI will do a lot of the building and operating for us. And then 80% of it, it's going to be ideation. So I had a friend who was in a meeting the other day with his team, and they were talking about a product, and someone on his team built the prototype in the meeting. And then they started, ideating around it. So I think that's, the two most important traits. And so I'd love to hear a neuroscience response to that: adaptation and ideation.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think you put that really beautifully. So adaptability is going to be key. It's kind of what I was talking about before in terms of when things are changing so rapidly and with such great volatility, you're going to have to be able to adapt. And that adaptability comes cognitively, right? So being able to kind of open your mind and track these changes, having a bit of forward orientation, and then having the emotional equanimity to be able to ride those changes out. And I think that that's probably the biggest challenge, right? Because when we are fearful, when we are anxious, this actually narrows our vision, it narrows our scope, and we're unable to see all of the opportunities that lie, outside our immediate kind of field of view, and that are, things that, all of the great benefits that we might get for, going one way versus another. So I think that adaptability is really key. Yeah, absolutely. Ideation. It is so cool what you just said about, designing the prototype, in a meeting. The class that I teach here at Wharton for undergraduates and MBA students, which is applied neuroscience for business decisions, and the kind of the capstone project is student-led teams have to pitch a neuroscience solution, okay, to some business challenge. So they have to identify what the pain point or opportunity is, come up with a neuroscience-backed solution, tell us what the science is behind it, and then actually present a business plan. So how are you going to take this to market? And we would do these kind of practice spitballing, ideation exercises every session. And it was amazing when ChatGPT first rolled out and students began to use it like immediately. And literally after 10 minutes, like I said, okay, I'm going to teach you guys about creative thinking and innovation, what we understand from neuroscience. And then you've got 10 minutes to come up and, just give us a little spitball pitch, a little elevator pitch. I had student teams coming up with like full on design prototypes and, and slide decks out. I'm like, wow, okay, we've leveled up in a serious way. And that's super exciting. I mean, that's one thing I would say about what we do here, broadly speaking, is an embrace of AI in the classroom. And we see it, I mean, I see it every day. The students who are really embracing it, and we celebrate it in a sense. They're just capable of doing so much more and having so much more fun doing, I think, too.
Great. Well, so we've talked about how AI can give us superpowers and how that can align with us in a neuroscience way. What about the other side about countering cognitive biases? How do you see AI supporting decision making for all of the long list of human cognitive biases that we have? And what's a good example that you've seen?
That is a great question. There's no doubt that we have a lot of biases. And they run the gamut from things like, loss aversion to endowment effects on the decision-making side to, unconscious or implicit biases that interfere with our ability to understand and empathize with and work with folks who are, not quite the same as us, right, or don't appear to be quite the same. So that, we are replete with biases. Why are they there? Because they're, useful shortcuts for an organism that's, working with, at the limitations of energy efficiency. And that's why our brains have all these kind of biases built in. They're basically shortcuts. So potentially AI can allow us to circumnavigate those as long as the training data that goes in is not biased, right? So you could, the danger, and I think this is something that folks have been outspoken about, over the last couple of years, is that if the biases go into the training data, then they're going to be in what AI is telling you, right? And that's not where we want to be. We want to have those biases kind of removed, right? Or, otherwise dealt with. But let's think about, for example, loss aversion. So loss aversion, that's this observation that I give you a gamble of winning money and losing money. And I have to offer you a lot more win than lose for you to get you to take that gamble. So it's financially not very rational at all. Most people are prone to this bias. We found that loss aversion arises. It emerges because most people's brains are vigilant for what they might lose, and that's just built in by evolution because it's much better to avoid the tiger than to miss out on eating a few berries or something like that. So there's danger out there. Okay, now that we know, and in fact, what that emerges very early in the decision making process, we tend to look at the thing that might hurt us, right? It attracts our attention. This is super interesting because where we look is a product of what we're looking for, which in this case, what might hurt us, and what the world looks like. So you can change what the world looks like, and that changes where people look, and that changes the decision-making process. So in this kind of gamble setup, which is, very similar to like picking stocks and things like that. If you make what you might win, the positive payoffs, bigger, bigger font, brighter, just highlight them in some way, then it attracts your attention. And that can help to overcome that bias. And so one of the things we've been working on with some financial services companies, for example, is harnessing that. So giving little tests to understand whether people are kind of dialed in out of fear, out of vigilance, and they're giving up what are otherwise good economic opportunities. And you can have the AI adjust the way the information is presented so that the potential windfalls are much more obvious and they attract your attention. And that is one way in which AI could it's not a very difficult thing to do, but it helped to seamlessly overcome some of those kind of hardwired biases.
Yeah, it's sort of like AI to point us towards our higher natures. So, okay, second to last question. For leaders who are looking to integrate neuroscience and AI insights into their decision making, what are the frameworks or principles that you recommend for them?
Wow, that's a great question. I think we've covered some of it already, which is I think to be a better leader in the age of AI, what it takes is being a better human. So I think that,
Mm.
again, working on your EQ, your social and emotional intelligence, so that you're a good modeler, so that you you can create a culture in which people thrive. Adaptability and flexibility, I think, are key. Epistemic humility, which just means knowing that we don't know everything, right, and not pretending to know everything. That is, I think, a hubris that is really important to overcome, especially when you're the leader. And so that, in some sense, you can capitalize on everyone's ability to contribute, right? And to understand that perhaps you don't know everything, but you've got the talent to help you, potentially move forward. So these are some of the things. There's a lot of material out there, and I think that folks can check that out. I would say that one thing leaders should be very aware of is that even if you don't provide AI in your workplace, people are bringing it with them.
Mm.
They're using it every day, just like students are using it here and across, the world. They are organically capitalizing on it. So I would say it's there, it's here to stay, embrace it. And the folks who are real power users, who when they wake up in the morning and that's the first thing that they do is crack open the AI, are the ones who are getting the most benefit. So they're getting the most benefit in terms of work product, so productivity, creativity, et cetera, and also the sort of positive, mental and physical health windfalls that come with that. So,
Mhm.
so I would say, yeah, it's there. Even if you think people aren't using it, they are. Just embrace that.
So, last question, 5 years from now, where are we in terms of leadership, innovation, workforce, and AI? Like, what do you think will happen? Where are we in 5 years?
I don't know if I'm confident to give a guess on
It's
that, but
okay, it's okay.
boy, is it going fast. And, there are a lot of predictions about whether we will have artificial general intelligence, in 5 years, in 3 years, in 6 months. Um, it's coming, I think. And when we reach that point, I think that then we have a decision that we're going to have to make as well, which is how do we want to chart the how we move forward as a species, right? As human beings. Do we want to make sure that the benefits are shared amongst all of humanity? Or, is it going to be kind of, winners and losers? And I hope that we can all collectively do this in a way so that everybody benefits.
Yeah, me too. Great. And so that's it for this week's episode. Everyone, what you've heard is the best way to lead in the age of AI is to become a better human, the best human you can be. I encourage you to follow the AI+HI Project wherever you enjoy your podcast. If you found today's episode valuable, please take a moment to comment, leave a review, and help spread the word. You can find all of our episodes on our website at shrm.org/AI+HI. Thanks for joining the conversation, and we'll catch you next time.
SHRM.